I mean, I've got a couple of more forward thinking, mature clients in this space as well, and they're doing this kind of thing. And I'll pick up on the skills point as well while I say this, but the approach that they're taking, and I'm helping them with, is, well, what's our task structure? What's our activity structure? Which bits can we do with AI? How much time or money were we spending on doing these things in the first place? How does that lead us to a benefits case or an ROI perspective? And then how can we therefore justify, we were doing these things, we're now doing them with AI. The delta is this, and the cost effectiveness is this. The difference in output is something. And that builds a bank of use cases. Then you optimize against those use cases, which then has a tangible impact on the business. So they're taking that kind of formal innovation structure or that kind of approach, which is the way to do it. But the skills point is, for me, then questionable, because when we look at the entirety of the skills market, what we have is a bunch of intangibles, things that we can't really measure, and we try and measure them declaratively. So we say to somebody, well, how good are you at communication? I'm an 8 out of 10. Based on what? Nothing. But let's just take your word for it. Versus in the AI space, we're really looking at activities, and activities subdivided into tasks, which AI can do. So we have task fit analysis versus things like skills analysis. And if you're familiar with the term data ecology, these two things are different levels. Tasks, activities, and skills. They mean different things. You can't attribute one to the other directly. And I haven't really seen a data taxonomy that moves one from the other. So effectively, we're now talking two different languages. And if we're talking two different languages, then we're talking about measuring things that have no relation to each other. So I'm not convinced of the whole idea of skills or skills-based organizations on that basis. But what do you think?
I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. And it kind of flies in the face with what a lot of the big organizations are saying. But if you look at some of those big organizations, LinkedIn being an example, if you look at some of those organizations, they are using AI to, support the job market, to look at being a personal, writing coach for your CV or whatever it might be, or, looking at the Netflix stuff with the volume of content and hyper-personalization of learning journeys. But I guess you could argue LinkedIn are looking to sell subscriptions to LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn courses. So they would want to go down the skills first route, which I buy into. I get that. I think it's the right thing for now. Whether it's the right thing for the future, questionable, because of where AI will potentially take us. I just don't know if anybody's actually having that debate or that conversation at that level, though, to say, what does skills first give us versus looking more at the data, for example, or understanding what does that mean on a practical level in terms of task. How long's a piece of string, right?
Well, the other thing I think that is, again, I don't agree with this, but I think that one of the talking points that I found at the show last week was that more than one vendor said to me, we have a skills taxonomy and we have an AI upskilling thing, whether it's a platform or journey, whatever it was that they were selling. And upon a little bit of scrutiny, it turns out what they were talking about was a course catalog. And a course, watching a video for 5 minutes doesn't make me skilled in a thing.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect between content consumption, passive content consumption, and skills. And I think any platform, I'm not looking specifically at LinkedIn, but any platform that has this disconnect, but it's selling that thing. So it's saying, we have a bank of content, whatever it is, videos, podcasts, materials, books, something. We have a bank of materials, and you are able to consume those in a way that has a taxonomy. We'll point you to those. That's fine. Recommender engines are a thing. And then if you consume those, we will say that you are skilled, and you can then declare yourself against those skills. There's such a logical disconnect between all of these things that it just doesn't work for me. And that's kind of my problem with this whole skills piece, that I haven't paid enough attention, or it's just not apparent that these things are linked to each other in a way that satisfies data reliability and validity.
And can someone actually prove that they're competent in doing the task or job role that they're being hired for or being assessed against? Yeah, for sure. Get that. Yeah. And I guess that's where this stuff poses a lot of those. It doesn't pose the questions, but it shines a light on a lot of this stuff. And That's what I say to a lot of people when people say, but what about this? Because AI does this. Like, I don't know, issues with data protection, putting data into large language models, for example. I said, AI hasn't done anything like that. We've always had the problem with sensitive data. AI has just shone a light on it and we've all started talking about that. So is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
Or is that just making us more aware that we shouldn't be putting personal data into social media or into Google or leaving an encrypted cybersecurity e-learning back on the day when somebody leaves an encrypted laptop on the train or whatever it might be. It's always been there. This stuff's always been there. So question mark goes back to, where's the innovation coming from? And I think the innovation comes from, certainly from a learning and development perspective right now, like we could just keep training people on mundane skills, illustration, or, the boring stuff that all of us have in our jobs and have to do. Or we could be a little bit different and understand what makes people more motivated and satisfied in their life and their job and their motivation, what stretches people's grey matter a little bit more and then allows them to properly collaborate or work with that kind of technology. And you mentioned critical thinking earlier. There's a whole bunch of things, learning agility, for example, that actually, when I start talking to clients and L&D folk about this, it's like it's very new, even that, the wraparound human distinctive skills piece. So should we be worrying so much about the tool because tools change, or should we be worrying more around what do people need to actually get the most out of these technologies and be ready to be agile and to change and to grow and to build new tasks and to handle new data or whatever that might be? That's a massive black hole at the moment, I think.
I think there are a number of massive black holes around that kind of thing. So the one that's most apparent to me, I mean, there are a couple, right? But let's take this concept of agility, learning agility.
Yeah.
And I have two problems with that. So the first thing is distribution of attributes in a population is usually normally distributed, right? So you got a bell-shaped curve, and if I can be bothered and figure it out, then maybe I'll draw a little graphic at this point.
You said bell-shaped there. So, I thought you said the bullshit curve. Maybe it should be the bullshit curve.
Maybe it should be. Phrase coined. There you go. Right.
Freudian slip, they call it, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of where you have a mean and then you have standard deviations and then eventually you get outliers. That kind of bell-shaped curve, there we go, is attributes of people tend to be distributed like that. And what that means is there are certain realities of life. Now, in the learning and development space, we like to shy away from realities of life. But this kind of concept of, if we do this particular thing and whatever it is, an intervention, and we scale it across an organization, then everybody's going to be amazing at this thing. And it's just not true, because you're going to have a distribution and maybe the mean will change ever so slightly, 5 or 10%, and maybe we can measure it. But your top performers are still going to be your top performers, and your poor performers will probably still be your poor performers. Maybe they'll change slightly in where they are on the curve, but mostly it's going to be normal distribution. And that's a reality that we never come to terms with, because we always say, we'll do this thing, we'll run a communications program, everybody will be amazing at communications. No, they won't. Let's not delude ourselves. They'll be terrible. And that leads me to two problems with what you were just articulating. So the first thing is that people are still going to be terrible at these things. Now, if people are still terrible at these things, we have to come to terms with that and think about, we're going to have displacement of populations who are not that good at things.
Yeah.
We're going to have fewer people who are high performers, and those people working synergistically with AI, they might change their place if they do or don't use AI in what they do. But broadly, you're going to have fewer people in the workforce who are needed for something. And the second thing is, what are they going to be needed for? Some of the things where I mentioned critical thinking, I've seen this as a talking point. Learning tech was no different. A lot of the basically same old speakers that you see every year were talking about the same old things. People should be doing critical thinking and decision making and problem solving and have oversight over the machines that are going to rule us all and things like this. And it's like, well, these are all things that people are very bad at, right? And the last 2 years of prompt engineering courses, 7 prompts to, change your life or whatever. This whole thing is just ludicrous, because, to me anyway, and the reason it is that people are bad at asking questions. Most people to take L&D as an example, most people who were managing suppliers who were saying, maybe I want to make an e-learning course, or maybe SMEs who were going to work with learning departments and say, I want a course on this. Usually they can't articulate what they want. They cannot articulate what they want in terms of look and feel or materials, or what the key messages are, what the information should be, because people can't ask questions. Go back to the days of Google. How do you structure a Google query? What are you actually asking for? Again, we're not very good at that.
Mm.
So we have all of these sort of problems in this space, and we're going to stand on our soapboxes and say, you know what, people are good at critical thinking and decision making. That's what they should do. It doesn't wash for me because most people are not good at these things. So these are the two problems in this space. We're going to have displacement and problems caused by that. And then we have an over-reliance on rhetoric, which kind of talks about people being good at things they're not very good at.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on all of that?